In my presentation, I aim to highlight the autoethnographic aspects of my narrative book, Representations of the Shoah, on a Café for Survivors and the Presence of the Past, published in German in 2021 by Psychosozial. This research explores the ongoing presence of the Shoah and the experiences of survivors while reflecting on the individual and social dynamics of guilt and defense through my own affective entanglements as a non-Jewish German researcher. Once a week, survivors of the Shoah meet at a cafe in a German city for coffee and cake, supervised by social workers, where they talk about everything, from hiding places and the camps to the annihilation. I ask, how do they cope with the horrors they survived? What role does the non-Jewish German environment of the cafe play in this? How did I come to be there, and how do the representations of the Shoah affect the research relationship between the survivors and me? There is no single right way to try to understand something that defies comprehension like the Shoah, a kind of storytelling that does not despair at the unbearability of the experience is as necessary as it is concealing. This applies to autobiographical as well as academic writing. The attempt to write down how it was in a sober or literary manner cuts off the agonizing memory of the experience which one cannot get rid of in one's memory. Supposedly objective writing is inappropriate for this. Rather, one's own experience should be taken very seriously as a starting point. Grünberg describes the idea of objectivity in the face of the Shoah as myth. As a non-Jewish German researching in this cafe, it requires intensive reflection on my own affective involvement in the topic of German crimes. I am guided by the concept of strong reflexivity. The term strong is used to describe the inclusion of the researcher's subjectivity, marking the difference between this and reflexive approaches, where the subjective factor is controlled by reflection, but not systematically included in the process of critical knowledge production. My research methods included regular participatory observations over 2 years, complemented by autoethnographies and biographical narrative interviews. For analysis, I employed depth hermeneutics and ethnopsychoanalysis. In this presentation, I will focus on how I present my research journey in the book, portraying it as an ongoing, unfinished, and conflictual process that is crucial to the relationships formed in the field. In this work, I have noted down scenes that seem significant to me, key scenes or epiphanies, based on the affective experience of the memories they evoked, reflected on them associatively, and connected them to theories. An epiphany in Danson's sense is a meaningful biographical experience that, as a moment of revelation or crisis, shifts one's perspective and establishes the focus of critical interpretive inquiry. Sometimes the writing took place immediately after the experience or scene. At other times, occasionally years later, it was prompted by an old image whose memory resurfaced in a new light in connection with more recent experiences. The inner conflicts, ambivalences, and the unspeakable nature of the topic make a smooth, linear presentation impossible. Therefore, my presentation in the book is inspired by Walter Benjamin's fragmentary method. An episodic structure is intended to break the identification, as broken as it is in the cafe, where the unassimilable presence of the Shoah, of trauma, is omnipresent. Stylistically, anything goes. The goal is always to do justice to the object and the subjects in a study, by fully acknowledging that complete success is impossible. Fragmented modes of representation have a long tradition in the social sciences, from Nietzsche through Adorno and Benjamin to Deleuze, Guattari, and Theveleit. In their contribution to the anthology Biographical Research and Discourse, Jan Coetzee and Geoffrey Wood advocate for an approach inspired by Walter Benjamin's collage-like style of representation, as well as by Georg Simmel's aphoristic and unsystematic thinking. Both rejected the Marxist idea of historical inevitability, as well as the bourgeois notion of autonomous subjects wielding historical power. If there is neither a powerful world spirit unifying everything, nor a powerful subject fully identical with itself, the world appears fragmented and must therefore be represented in fragments. Benjamin's and Simmel's depictions stem from a desire to experiment with innovative methodological approaches and a rejection of the linearity of societal evolution. The aim is not to construct a systematically functioning ground theory, but rather to gather individual splinters and fragments, rubble, that create a mosaic-like impression of both the whole and its brokenness. This form of research and writing becomes fundamentally important when the research subject must experience the world's violence firsthand. There is no ideal experience that can be neatly classified within sociological systems. Yet it is still possible to find fragmented expressions that make the horror broadly perceptible. The search for words not only serves the public, but also helps those directly affected who cannot fully comprehend what has happened or is happening to them on an individual level, since it is not individual but social violence inflicted upon them. Coetzee and Wood regard the sociologist's role as helping the marginalized to remember and understand, piecing together the fragments of their lives. Fragmented writing, the collage of multiple stories and storylines, is also the preferred method of representation and autoethnography. In Benjamin's work, however, these collages take on another special meaning. He calls them dialectical images, images that show how the shattered promises and hopes of the past flash up in the present and point to the future. Such images emerge in the moment of danger, when the lost, the defeated, the weak, those cast onto the rubble heaps of history, are at risk of being consigned to oblivion. Dialectical images cling to the messianic hope of the redemption of the dead. Such images can only be presented as fragments, as they aim to decompose the systematic doom through the memory of the rebel. I do not wish to build a tidy, meaningful narrative over the cellar of the past, sealing it off and imposing meaning on what is meaningless, but rather to trace the uncanny presence of the past. I pursue this goal through a collage of various scenes. After presenting the mythology and offering an overview with brief descriptions of the key figures in the scenes and interviews, the episode Only Saved, Not Liberated follows. It begins by describing my route to the café without any theoretical framing, recounting my epiphany moment at a conference, the subsequent encounter with one of the speakers, and my writing of the conference report, which ultimately led to my being asked to work in the café for Shoah survivors. Next, under the heading Pedigree, I present my background, my biographical starting point, through a conversation with my father, who was born in 1939, about my grandparents, who were adults under National Socialism. The section titled Is This Bearable? Initiation introduces the café, describing its opening date and the first meeting between survivors and Doron, the café's founder. The sequence of scenes proceeds chronologically until I enter the café. From that point onward, the narrative becomes fragmented. A linear style is inadequate for recounting the shattered experiences at hand. Under the heading In the Café, the following scenes can be read in any order, as they only reference each other sporadically. Interwoven between the scenes is an analysis of two interviews with survivors from the café, Marie, a hidden child survivor, and Adam, who survived the Lodz ghetto, Auschwitz, and forced labor as a teenager in a satellite camp of Neuengamme. Each of these accounts can be viewed independently, as there is no contrasting comparison. This section begins with the scene Strong Shoulder, which focuses on the question of holding and enduring. Mr. Abel and the children's choir, is a scene where the future briefly flashes up as Jewish children sing, illustrating the failure of the Nazis' attempt to exterminate the Jewish people. Yet, with the time tunnel, the past abruptly intrudes on the present as the unredeemed and irredeemable, perforating the walls of the café. The visit of a Christian woman to the café who wants to bless the Jewish people and thus redeem herself is the subject of the scene of Wounds and Christians. It provides an example of attempts to close the wound without confronting the view into the time tunnels. Next comes the first interview interpretation, Marie, Where Does She Belong?, which focuses on Marie's search for national, religious, and familial belonging, as well as the interaction between the two of us. In the following scene, no microphone expert, this conflict situation is taken up again, and my role in the café is scrutinized in depth. Adam with a gun in his hand is the next interview analysis. In contrast to Marie, who is searching, his focus is on fighting the trauma and its public denial as a survivor in fighter style. The final scene is the shit, which must turn straight to the café's foul-smelling toilet, to the abject Shoah. I deliberately refrained from using transitions between the scenes, neither arranging them in the order in which they occurred, nor building a fictional framework narrative around them that might force them into an artificial coherence. After the specific scenes and interviews, the chapter "The Café is an Impossible Space," now under the heading "Back at the Desk," brings together insights from unwritten encounters as well as the interviews and scenes already discussed, which gives clues to the question of what kind of place this is and theoretically condenses and classifies it from a somewhat more abstract perspective with the help of the spatial theories of Michel Foucault, Edward Soja, Victor Turner, and Donald Winnicott. In the concluding Afterword 2018, I reflect on my approach once again and pose the question of conclusions and the what next. In contrast to the thesis, the book then takes a look at the publication year, 2021, with almost 3 years having passed, 2021 in Vienna. I found the café to be a place and space that attempts to bridge the dichotomies of trauma and reality, past and present, Jewishness and the non-Jewish environment. The presentations of the Shoah are representations of the unrepresentable. Where the café may not heal anything, it nonetheless provides space for the unspeakable.